Hey, Composite Gloves here. I am wearing a hat, and today we're going to be going into Iris 2, specifically modulation with Iris 2. Once you understand this, you pretty much understand all the features and functions of Iris 2. So you get to it by clicking this little modulation tab. I don't know what I was going to say, modulation. You can also hide your keyboard if that's of important note to you. But modulation tab, and you can actually undock it by clicking. And you're like, whoa, look at that. Isn't that just the fanciest? And you're able to redock it by exiting, and as you see the dock icon right there. So let's go ahead and let's first deal with envelopes, because those are a little more straightforward. I'm assuming you know what envelopes are, Sound and Synth basics, if you don't. So here we have an envelope. It's a typical ADSR envelope, but they give us the option of inverting it. So right now I have a sound, and the envelope is as it looks. So let's first talk about hooking up an envelope. So let's say that I have my gain. Let's say there's nothing on here, right? So to clear it, you'd go right click and you could go to clear mod assignment. And right now there's nothing. So if I were to hit a note, it's going to play at this level. When I let go, it's going to not play. It's going to be 0. So that's it. So pretty straightforward. I'll even turn off the effects. Let's just go to send. And oh, well, that's very undesirable. So anyways, you get the idea. So let's go ahead and add an envelope to make it sound, to shape the sound, because we don't want it to sound like that. It's not that great. So we're going to right click. There's a couple ways to do this. So the first and most straightforward way is you can grab the envelope, just click once, and you get the little envelope E1, and you can drop it where you want. Or you can right click and you can drop this thing anywhere there's these dots and circles. So I'm going to right click on one, and I can actually select a source. So you have LFOs, envelopes, macros, and controllers, which are all sources that we can use to control things. So I'm going to hook it up to envelope number 1. So right now it's hooked up to envelope number 1. While the invert switch is on, it pretty much behaves the way you think it would. So our volume starts out very loud, and then it quickly decays over time. We sustain, which isn't worth a whole lot, but there's a sustain, and then we have a release phase. So it behaves exactly the way you think. It turns on. It's going to sound like a pluck. But let me also configure this. So this little line right here represents the modulation range. So as you drag down, it will move the modulation range. So what's going to happen is we've configured it so that it starts off, and then it's going to turn on over time and reach this value. It can only go as high as this line has been set, and you can click and drag up and down to change this line. As we move this knob, it'll change where this sets. Sets, I guess it means the same thing. So it'll change where this thing is. And that's important to know, because if you're moving and you have multiple modulation sources based on where this knob is, moving that knob could change things you did not intend to change. But if I play a note now, it's going to turn on quickly and then turn off just as quickly, pretty much. You see, that's quite a nice sound. I actually like that one. So kind of a cool sound. Now, that's what's going on. Now, I keep saying now. Now. If I flip this modulation range the other way, what I've just done is told this envelope, I've basically said start at this value and increase to this value. So I've essentially flipped this envelope upside down. So now a low value will actually tell it, oh, this is the off range. This is the range it turns off at. So it turns on. So it starts here and actually turns on and then turns off. So if I actually take my sustain and move it up, as you see when I release, you can see it on the release, or you hear it on the release too. But that little white dot represents where the modulation is at. They kind of are a bit jumpy, so they're not totally worth what they always look like what they're doing. But you get a general feel for what's going on. But you heard it as it turns off. It's actually turning up the volume. So I've essentially swapped it. Now, there's another way I can do this. So this is our original way, right? And if we have our pluck sound, it's going to do our pluck for us. But if I invert it, what I've just told it is first, so I've basically said start here and turn off that way. So instead of starting here, or start here and turn on that way, when this value hits at the maximum, it is going to go down. When it's at its minimum, it's going to pull up. That's all you need to know. So I've inverted the envelope versus. So when the envelope invert button it looks like it's on, because to me this looks like it's on, but that is not inverted. It's going to behave the way you want. Or I guess it's inverted in the way that it says. You pick a way that's inverted in a way that's not inverted, and then, so that's that. Anyways, when the invert button's on, it behaves the way I expect it to. It'll turn on in this direction. When it's off, it'll turn on in this direction. So, and by turning on, I mean turning up. So this value is turning up. So you can do this with multiple envelopes. So, okay, we've got that all figured out, hopefully. And you can hook these things up to anything. Like you can have your distortion apply over time. You can have your envelope go over time. You see they even have envelope 1 is hooked up to the mod wheel. So there's a number of things. The sound didn't come just from this, but it certainly happened quite a bit more. And you can see the various modulation ranges. If I move this down, like, hey, look, there's the modulation range that was there. So this isn't really doing all that much because the cutoff knob hasn't been moved. But if we bring the cutoff knob down, suddenly this begins to play a role and you can actually see the modulation moving. So we can hook these things up in various spots. Now let's move over to a simple topic as well. We'll keep it simple for now. So I'm going to right click and clear that mod assignment. And let's say I would rather control this volume knob with a low frequency oscillator or an LFO. So and this time I'm just going to click. Wow. There we go. You can also just click and hold down and drag. But what this thing does is you see there's a negative and a positive oscillation, and this is the range. And what happens is as we turn our value up, it's going to behave the exact same way the envelope did. So it's going to turn up over time. So it's going to go on over time, and it's going to go off over time. And it's going to oscillate our volume for us with our low frequency. Right now it's a sine wave, so it's going to turn on the volume, off the volume. And you see the range goes all the way down past. So this is the negative oscillation. The value is going down. The bright side is the value is going up. So it's a little more visually friendly. You're able to restart your LFO every time you hit a note, I believe is what this restart means in this particular instance. Yeah, so if you have like multiple notes going, it's going to restart the envelope. Restart. Oh, see, it says restart with each new voice. There you go. And then we also have sync, which will sync it up with your DAW, and you notice that we get our rate value changes. So here we have a value in hertz. With sync on, we get a value as a ratio. So we have a 1/4. And you can actually drag up and down and change it. Or not drag up and down, you have to move the actual knob. Or you can type in a value if you're so inclined. You notice that we can modulate these, and we can also modulate these, the slider. Now this slider will actually morph between shapes. And we have a whole bunch of different types of LFOs that we can do. So we have like sample and hold, saw up and down, those sorts of things. And we can actually morph them according to the desires of our hearts. Curved. So just a bunch of really cool shapes that can give you perhaps types of distorted movements at some sort of a ratio that would be musically useful. Pretty straightforward and simple. So that's your modulation. Now we have a couple other things on here. Let's go to a sine wave. And that's our rate. Now our depth is how much of this modulation is actually applied. So if we have a very low depth, this is not going to oscillate very far back and forth. As you can see, except for occasionally it jumps all the way down there. It is weird stuff. And then as we move it up, it will become more and more active. So that's what depth does. Phase is just a shift. So let's say that we want it to start over 90 degrees. Which is so nice that it gives us 2s in degrees. So if you know trigonometry, you're familiar with the unit circle, we shift it 90 degrees over. It's going to start right there, okay? So you see we get the little click. If we do it at 180, we will have shifted to the other zero crossing value. And then, of course, 270, so forth. So it shifts it through in time. It doesn't show us, but it's doing it. And you can hear it. So there you go. And next up, we have the attack. So The attack is how long it takes the depth to become fully active. So we could set it, we could set it to be 1,000 milliseconds. So over 1 second, the depth, you can imagine the depth knob turning up over 1 second. That's pretty much what's happening. Let me play a single note. So you can see it become more and more aggressive over time. If we set this to be very long, we can only go up to 2.5 seconds. But check it out. And so you see, and it's also according to our modulation range for our max value. So that is pretty cool. So that is the LFOs, and you can hook those up to any number of things. So, okay, once we get through this and our envelopes, these are the most complicated ones, but we can get even more complicated. Let's cover the macro knobs first. So if you click up here, if you're making your own patch, hooking up these macro knobs is a really good idea. So you could take these macro knobs and hook them up. That's wherever you see these M whatever up to M8. And these give you just quick ways of accessing various parameters. So you say, if right now our modulation range for our M1 is on distortion, and you see they named it crunch. You can actually double click and name it whatever you want to. And as we turn it up, you can see the corresponding dot moving. Even though it's blinking like crazy, you can see it moving. And we move it down, so you can see the modulation actually happening. And that is according to this value right here, our modulation range. So you're able to turn on things on and off. And this can be really cool because let's say like, M1, okay, let's grab another M1 and we get to our macros here. And let's say, but when we turn this one on, we want to turn that one off. And so we'll turn this up, and let me get rid of macro 7. Clear mod assignment. Okay, so it's going to start at its maximum value, and this one's starting, and you could tell because it's going the other direction. If it was going this way, it would turn on in the same fashion this one's turning on, but it's going in the opposite direction. So as we turn it on, it actually turns that one off. So you can create these ratios, things that are very musically useful. And also just when you're messing around with your patch, you can get stuff like that right away. Now, now you understand this. So this is like basically a constant, and these are moving values over time. Well, you can begin to do some weird stuff with things like this. So we could say, hey, let's take which one did I get rid of? M7. Let's take modulator 7 and put it on here. And now we say, well, what is the value, the output value of this gain knob? Well, does the value of this knob add to whatever the current value of this is? Does it subtract? Does it multiply? Like, we don't know. So what you can do is you can actually right click, and you see we have combine mod 1 and 2, and we also have one for combine mod 2 and 3. And we're able to actually change that relationship. So we can have it so that they do multiply. We can have it so they add, so that I believe this takes the minimum value and takes the maximum value. And so just some interesting things. I don't come in here and mess with these features because they're kind of like, as far as your creative process goes, they're nice to have if you want to do something specific. But if you're just being creative and having fun, you'd probably come in there and just click on things to see what would happen anyways. So if someone's like literally that deliberately creative, I'm very impressed. So that is that. Some people are. I mean, it just depends on your vision, how clear you have what you want to do in your mind. So that is what is going on there. So that's the modulation. And you can see that we have those cool waves. And so we come here and go, we could hook it up to here. Oh, we missed a couple. We have controllers. So controllers I have a MIDI controller in front of me. So a lot of this stuff applies to me when it didn't used to. We have key tracking, which is the very same as what's on the master filter. So you can go check out the master, when we talk about the master effects and send effects video. I believe it was the previous video. And that one, we talk about what this knob does. It does the same thing, except for now you can hook it up to whatever parameter can be modulated. Velocity does the same thing velocity does, except for you can hook it up to whatever parameter you want, covered in the same video. Aftertouch, and aftertouch is, of course, when you hit a key, and then you can add pressure. So you add pressure, and it responds to pressure, basically. That's aftertouch. And then we have mod wheel, which is the mod wheel, which when it's open as a VST and FL, I have to configure that myself. But you're able to hook up your mod wheel to make things move. So for example, the mod wheel is currently hooked up to move the filter. So if I were to move the mod, whoops, that's not the mod. We'll talk about that too. and move this. CC1. Oh, you know what? They did it through CCs. Oh, this is annoying. Okay, so that's good to know. So open up a MIDI out plugin. Set the port on this guy to 1. So MIDI input port 1. As you can see, I've never done this before, but it's pretty straightforward. It takes forever for the interface to open. Okay, go to a knob, hit, or just click the little cog. You used to have to click configure. And go to controller, CC1, and we'll just name it mod wheel. And hit accept, and it's on port 0. So now this should affect that. There we go, it's moving. You can't like right click, you can't do your conventional method with this. But now we can click this, move the mod wheel on your controller. Now it moves the thing. So great, except for it's not moving this thing. I've not messed with this feature a ton here, but that's incredibly annoying. I prefer to use macros because you can directly automate macros. So if we come in here in FL, but I've noticed that this is just a battle in most DAWs. Like it just depends. Some of them are friendly with stuff like this. Some of them aren't. So if let's say that I want to, if I was to do this, I'd be like, I'm just going to use macro 8. Forget whatever else. Forget the reverb. Who needs that? And we'll go ahead and do this. And then I just automate this knob. So you like move it, tools, last tweaked, create automation clip. Or if you're cool and have auto hotkeys, you can see it's modulating macro 8. Play it over time. Whoa, how cool is that? So there's a couple other settings just to wrap this all up in a bow. So the last couple of things we haven't covered, or at least I don't remember specifically saying, these triangles move you up and down by octaves. You can change your pitch bend range. So this is nice because it actually is linked up. So you can change your pitch bend range by just adding the values here, but it won't, in FL, it doesn't matter here. You can actually pitch bend down a different value than you can up, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But you can, in order to change the range in FL, you'd have to actually change the range on the pitch knob on the plugin wrapper. And you see now it can go the full range, and this doesn't support the full range, so it'd be wise to match it. So now we have an octave. Like, whoa, look at us. That's the mod wheel, up and down an octave. And then, of course, if we click this button here, we are given the ability to change when our samples are active over the keyboard. So if we only want big PCM C4 to be active when we're playing notes C1 to C3, we can do that. You just drag it in, as you can see. And like now let's include C3. And right now that's on B -1. And so there you go. That is how that works. And you can actually solo mute from here too, which is also linked to that. They have these buttons everywhere. That's great. And I'm trying to think anything else. No, that's everything. You should know what every button does. That's it's pretty good stuff. We're gonna be looking at it, using it in one more video, and that's gonna be that. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.